Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm George Thomas. Today, the U.S. launching still more strikes against Houthi ballistic missile sites in Yemen. And as those battles heat up, Israel and the U.S. remembering the plight of the hostages still being held by Hamas, as medicine is on its way to help them. A revival coming to Gaza after the Israeli war with Hamas is over. We'll hear from an aide to the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, who says God is already at work there through dreams and visions. Brutal cold, wow, still hitting much of the U.S. with winter warnings putting millions here on high alert, and sadly the death toll is rising. And finally, evangelist Franklin Graham taking the gospel to a region where it's desperately needed amid the immigration crisis along our U.S. border with Mexico. Folks, those stories and much more on today's News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. We begin in the Middle East, where the U.S. again struck Houthi ballistic missile sites in Yemen on Wednesday, firing a barrage of missiles launched from ships and submarines, hitting 14 launch sites considered to be, quote, imminent threat. The attacks come as U.S. senators and Israelis highlighted the plight of more than 100 hostages held by Hamas now for more than 100 days. As my colleague Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, after more than 3 months of captivity, life-saving medicine is on its way to the hostages. Take a look.
On October 7th, Hamas kidnapped Sharon Cuneo, her husband David, and their twin 3-year-old girls. Hamas released Sharon and her children, but her husband remains. She remembers the last thing he said to her.
He told me, fight for me, don't give up. Please yell what I can't yell. Please help me to get out. And he told me, I'm scared as hell. That was the last sentence, I'm scared as hell.
On Wednesday, Qatar dispatched 2 planes carrying more than 60 tons of medicine and other aid to Gaza for the hostages and Palestinians. It's the first agreement between Israel and Hamas since November. A senior Hamas official said that for every box of medicine for the hostages, 1,000 boxes will go to Palestinians. However, no word on when or how the medicine would be distributed to the hostages, many of them dependent on the medications.
We will strive and do all the efforts in coordination with Qatar, who are the ones who developed, initiated and are leading this move, to make sure that, as is required everywhere in the world and from international organizations, including the Red Cross, to make sure that the medicines that our abductees need, and they need medicines, reach them.
On Capitol Hill, U.S. senators met with families of the hostages, including U.S. citizens.
Our sons have so much yet to give to the world. We must do everything possible to bring them back. Any deal put forward must include them all. These boys could be your boys. They must be brought home. They cannot be treated as a last priority. They cannot be overlooked.
So we are going to do everything we can. We are going to do everything we can because our hearts are broken, and we must bring them home, all of them.
Many of those hostages are likely held in the labyrinth of tunnels under the Gaza Strip. The IDF says the tunnel system is far bigger than estimated, with as many as 450 miles throughout Gaza. In the meantime, the fate of Sharon's husband David and the rest of the hostages remains uncertain.
I cry all day. I just sit around and cry all day, watching videos in all kind of groups, looking for any information about him, watching his pictures on my phone, and hearing his voice messages.
Until then, Sharon Cuneo and the rest of Israel watch and wait.
Chris now joins me now from our bureau in Jerusalem. Chris, obviously the hostages are taking front and center spotlight, but does Israel believe military action is the best way to get the hostages out? Or, tough question here, are they willing to sacrifice the remaining hostages in order to destroy Hamas completely?
Well, George, that's the big debate in Israel right now. You know, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, prime minister, they believe that military pressure is the best way. Some believe maybe the only way to get the hostages out. Whether or not they'll be sacrificed, like you allude to, remains to be seen. But some believe time's running out. It's been more than 100 days. Many of these hostages are suffering. That's why they need the much-needed medicine right now. Some could be dying. Hamas has actually murdered some. So another proposal on the table for some, or at least out in the press, has been, well, let's release all 6,000 Palestinian prisoners for all of the hostages. The caveat to that proposal is the prisoners couldn't come to the West Bank. They would have to go to Gaza. Now, another thing, George, is that we interviewed Caleb Myers. He's the founder of voiceforfreedom.org. Now, he says the best way to release the hostages is to put pressure on Qatar, or Qatar, as some people say. They've been funding Hamas for years, and the main Hamas leaders live in Doha, the capital of Qatar, and they're mediators right now. Some accuse them of being both the arsonists and the firemen, currying favor with the West while funding terror here in the Middle East. So maybe that could be the way forward for some. It doesn't look like it's going to happen right now, though.
As we've reported, the U.S. has launched its fourth strikes against the Houthis. It doesn't seem like these guys are in any way stopping their attacks, launching more attacks. Do you think Iran is involved in these attacks launched by Houthis?
Well, totally, George. They're funding, supplying, and directing likely many of these Houthi attacks. As you said earlier, it was a U.S. Navy intercepted a small vessel. They transported weapons, critical weapons, ballistic missile, cruise missile components, a violation of the UN resolution. So the U.S. is warning Iran to stop supplying those weapons, but so far it doesn't have to be much of an impact. As you said in your intro, an imminent threat posed by the Houthis is why the U.S. struck those missiles literally on the launching pad. And by the way, the Houthis are back on the list of designated global terrorists. The Biden administration took them off the beginning of 2021, but now they're back on. And what the Houthis have done has affected global commerce there in the Red Sea.
World leaders are gathering in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. Israel's President Isaac Herzog had a chance to address the leaders. He says that Israel has lost complete trust in the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. Real quickly, what were his key points?
Well, nobody in his right mind, he says, willing to think about the peace agreements right now. Everybody here in Israel wants to know if they're not going to be attacked, whether from the north or the south or even in the east. And, you know, after 30 years of the peace process, they've lost trust in that because they see terror being glorified by their neighbors. That would include the Palestinian Authority. Now, he added, it's not just a war between Israel and Hamas, but the world needs to see it's really a war with the evil empire coming out of Iran.
Yeah. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is floating this idea, you know, that Israel and Saudi Arabia will have a normalization of relations, and in exchange that Israel pursues a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Is that idea getting any nibble from the Israelis?
No, not at all, George. It feels like not only the Israeli government is rejecting that, but also the Israeli people. Who would lead a Palestinian state? Right now, the Palestinian Authority has yet to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. Members of Fatah, the PA's political arm, they actually participated in October 7th. And in fact, the Palestinian Authority in any future Palestinian state wants to include Hamas in the government. You know, as I said, it's been 30 years since the Oslo peace process. It began with that famous signing we all remember on the White House with Prime Minister Rabin, PA leader Yasser Arafat. And so if it hasn't happened in the past 30 years, there's few Israelis who have an appetite for a Palestinian state here in 2023.
Chris, I was there with you shortly after the October 7th attacks. Obviously, there was a lot of focus and worry about what was going on in the northern part of Israel along the Lebanese border. Obviously, the dynamics have changed dramatically since then. Is there a feeling that war is imminent with Hezbollah in the north?
There is. In fact, the IDF has said it quite openly. There are diplomatic proposals on the table that Hezbollah would pull back about 7 to 9 kilometers. But one Israeli expert that I've heard of said that's really Hezbollah is woven into the civilian infrastructure. That would be nearly impossible. And Israel says the time for diplomacy is running out. Quick history lesson, George. Israel pulled out of the security zone in South Lebanon from 1982 to 2000. After they did that, the Hezbollah filled that vacuum. And so now we have maybe 200,000 rockets. On the south, in 2005, Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip. Now we have Hamas filling that vacuum. And so Israel is really facing threats on both sides because they pulled out and gave land to future Islamic groups.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, as always, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. Please continue with you along your excellent team to stay safe. Coming up, could a revival be coming to Gaza after the Israeli war against Hamas is over? Incredible. An aide to the Palestinian leader, Yasser Arafat, says God is already at work through dreams and visions. We'll hear from him when we come back.
Download the CBN News app. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Get the CBN News app today.
Welcome back. A former sharpshooter and aide to Yasser Arafat believes revival will break out in Gaza after the end of the war there. Appearing on this week's edition of The Global Lane, Tass Saada says God's Holy Spirit is already changing Palestinian hearts through dreams and visions. Take a look.
Many Muslims are looking for an alternative to Islam. And so naturally, my team are always promoting Christianity and their life whenever it's safe. And so we're looking at a good revival going on already in the Gaza Strip due to what has happened, really. Despite of the destruction that is taking place, I believe God have a purpose to get the Palestinians in Gaza wake up and look at a different alternative to what they believe.
How about during the war as it's continuing? Our hearts turning. What do you see happening?
So. I just got a report from one of my team members that about 200 Gazans gave their heart to Jesus in one lump sum because the Lord appeared to them in visions and dreams, and they were hugging each other and rejoicing, and realized that all of them had the same vision that each one of them had. And so, obviously, the Lord is doing his work, and the believers around also in the land are doing their work.
Well, looking forward then again, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey are offering to help reconstruct and govern Gaza after the war. So what do you think of that idea?
Qatar will be a better alternative from what they have as their own leadership. The Palestinian Authority is really not the answer. They are not interested anyway. Qatar or United Arab Emirates, they all don't like each other. But yet, when it comes to the Palestinian, they all come together. And so, I think Qatar is taking the lead. They are doing a lot more talk to the Israelis. And I think what Qatar has done in Doha, I grew up in Doha, Qatar. I went there a couple of times. I did not find my ways because it changed so much.
Tass, aren't they hosting Hamas? Haven't they helped create Hamas and be part of the whole Muslim Brotherhood thing?
They did. That's a big concern. I'm glad you bring that up. And I really believe all of these Arab nations are in allowing Israel to do what they need to do. because they are tired of this issue, the Palestinian issue, and they want to see a solution. And by destroying Hamas entirely and turning over the Gaza Strip to Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, Gaza Strip would become probably, eventually, it'll be another Singapore. And that's what I'm hoping for.
As you know, Secretary of State Blinken and President Biden are pushing a two-state solution. So two-state or one state, which would work better?
I don't believe in the two-state solution. From the beginning, from early days of my salvation, when I read the Bible, there is no two states. There is one state, Israel, for both to live equally and justly. And I believe, I'm working with the Israeli team and Palestinian team myself, are talking about a federation. And we have already created all the ways how we can get it done. It's a matter of getting the leadership, especially the United States, to buy into this idea and take the federation as an idea, the Federation of Israel or Federation of Israel-Palestine. I would rather Federation of Israel and just leave it at that.
As you know, our viewers are praying for the peace of Jerusalem and an end to this war. So what else should they be praying right now, and how can they help?
Pray for Israel and the Palestinian people to see the vision of what is better for them. If I look at it as a Palestinian myself, the Arabs have not done that much for me, to be honest about it. Israel have, looking at what Israel has done in the years that Israel have been established, look at where they're at and where the Palestinians are. I would rather to be united with Israel and give the Palestinians equal rights within the Palestinian. That's the idea of the federation that we are working on with my Israeli team. This federation will be an equal justice for all Israelis and Palestinians to live equally and justly. Israelis are worried that if this federation idea takes place, then the numbers of the Muslims will be higher. And that's not true. That's not true. The federation will not include the Gaza Strip and take the West Bank and make it as part of Israel and create a federation of Israel and Palestine together into one nation. I believe the Palestinians will be much better off. Their leaders have not done anything. Yeah. From Mahmoud Abbas on, and before that, Yasser Arafat. The people around him who are now leading, they are the crooks, to be honest about it. And they robbed their people.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, ushering in an Islamic savior, Iran's motivation for destroying Israel, and the newly released Open Doors U.S. World Watch list, an alarming uptick in global violence against Christians. You can catch The Global Lane tonight on CBN News Channel at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Still ahead here at home, still more brutal cold weather is hitting much of the country, with millions on high alert from winter warnings. We'll bring you that story right after this. Well, if you haven't noticed, here in the U.S., another round of bitter cold is settling on much of our nation, from the central U.S. into the east. And sadly, the death toll from the winter weather rose overnight, while winter warnings are putting millions on high alert. Mark Martin has the chilly story.
From coast to coast, around 30 people have lost their lives because of the winter conditions. Parts of the Northwest face heavy snow and ice. In Portland, Oregon, 3 people died after a power line fell onto their car. Authorities say they believe the victims were electrocuted after they got out of their vehicle. Only a toddler survived the incident. The National Weather Service reports more freezing rain could return to the Pacific Northwest Thursday and Friday. Across the country in Scranton, Pennsylvania, more tragedy. A box truck struck and killed 5 women from the same family on Interstate 81 after they got out of their car following a separate crash. And in the Midwest, brutally cold weather.
Okay, ready? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Commuters power through frigid temperatures in the single digits. In some states, the temps are 35 degrees below average.
It's a splintering cold where it feels like almost like you have pins or needles pricking you.
In the Northeast, residents dealing with their share of snow.
Exhausting, it's exhausting, but neighbors are taking care of each other.
From the Central Plains and Midwest to the Mid-South, more cities face a second round of snow, with more expected to fall on the East Coast on Friday. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thank you, Mark. Coming up, evangelist Franklin Graham set to take the gospel to a region that desperately needs it along the southern border amidst the immigration crisis. We'll bring you that story when we come back. Stay with us.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Evangelist Franklin Graham is taking his God Loves You tour to the U.S. southern border next month. Graham will kick off the 10-city God tour on February 24th in Brownsville, Texas, and will continue through Texas and Arizona until it wraps up on March 9th in Chula Vista, California. Graham told CBN News he's not going to the border to speak against U.S. border policy. Instead, he said, quote, he's going there to preach the good news of Jesus Christ where it's desperately needed. We are taking the God Love Tour to the southern border this year because it is one of the neediest areas of our country at this time. And people need to hear the message of God, of hope rather, from God's Word. You can find out more about what Graham's evangelistic tour is doing by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Folks, that is it for today's edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our CBN News programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. Or you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you will join us again next time. From all of us here at the headquarters of the Christian Broadcasting Network, have a great day. Goodbye, and God bless.